All right. Welcome again. My name is Shaitia Sproul, and I am a program manager for the Treasurer's Office of Economic Empowerment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our Equal Pay Roundtable conversation titled The Takeout, Women, Equal Pay, and the Restaurant Industry. We're going to get right into the conversation, but before I do that, I want to go over some quick housekeeping in our little agenda. Excuse me. Some things to note, this is our agenda. We're gonna go through our welcome. We're gonna do our panel discussion. There will be an opportunity for audience Q&A and closing remarks. Just as a reminder, the Zoom webinar is being recorded. The recording may be uploaded onto a public website for future use. This webinar is also being streamed live on Facebook and Twitter. So for our Zoom attendees, please feel free to share our live video from our Facebook page. We'll be sure to drop that link in the chat. Please feel free to submit any questions in the chat by using the Q&A function in Zoom or the comment section on Facebook. You can also submit questions in the chat, but just note that it may be harder for us to see that. Any resources or links that are shared today, discussed today, we will definitely share them via email to all of the registrants. So if you haven't and you're watching from Facebook and you want to see that, just make sure you go to the registration link in the Facebook event register. That way you get that follow-up email with the recording and any links. And then if you have any questions, you can always feel free to send us direct questions, comments, and feedback to equalpayma@tre.state.ma.us. Or again, you can also check us out on equalpayma.com. Thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to start introducing our panelists. Today we have Rebecca Rathgullo. She's the president of the Gallows Group, a hospitality conglomerate based in Boston. The Gallows, Banyan Bar and Refuge, Blackbird Donuts, and Sally's Sandwiches. She's from Boston. She's been on the board of Planned Parenthood, Ellis Neighborhood Association, and Beaver Country Day School. She is actively involved in the voter registration and election efforts. A graduate of Smith College with an A.B. in government, Rebecca has worked for both U.S. Senator Kennedy and Mayor Bloomberg, and Rebecca has her cooking degree from the Institute of Culinary Education in New York, and now she lives in Boston with her husband and 2 daughters. Next, we have Amy McMahon. She's founded and has owned Mesa Verde in downtown Greenfield for 18 years, finishing her 2nd year of ministerial training at the Intervisions Institute for Spiritual Development, founded by the Reverend Dr. Iyanla Van Zandt. She sits on the board of directors of Greenfield Savings Bank. Next, we have Kiana James. Kiana James is a workforce development specialist at United States Department of Labor and co-owner of Unique Cafe, a Jamaican-American restaurant in Worcester. Kiana is a Worcester native, but graduated from Rhode Island College, receiving a BA in psychology and behavioral neuroscience. Kiana seeks to create a pipeline of growth and opportunities to help young women maximize their potential and attain their goals. Currently, she sits on the Status of Women Advisory Board as vice chair for the city of Worcester, is a part of the United Way's Women's Initiative Leadership Council and their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Kiana is a returned Peace Corps volunteer with the desire to serve her community in some capacity while focusing on improving policies, programs, and regulatory guidelines and best practices. Next, we have Michelle Miller. Michelle is the director of the Center for Women in Enterprise, Central Massachusetts Women's Business Center. Michelle holds an MA in International Development and Social Change from Clark University. She ran a coffee shop for 5 years, in which she helped to shed light on working conditions in South America and provided vocational training to people with disabilities. Michelle has managed economic development and rehabilitation programs in Massachusetts, as well as in Colombia, Peru, and Nicaragua. These programs assisted victims of conflict in rebuilding their lives, providing such services as prosthetic donation and fitting, psychosocial rehabilitation, and microfinance. Michelle has a passion for entrepreneurship and building bridges to success. And then finally, our moderator for today, Commissioner Ogur Okoye. Olga Winnie Okoye is a self-described multitasker extraordinaire, seeker, and disruptor who proudly wears and juggles the multiple hats that is in her daily life. Mother of five, a trial attorney, inspirational author, life coach, and activist. Olga is the principal attorney at BOS Legal Group, LLC, a general practice law firm located in Lynn, Mass, and brings over 18 years of experience in her practice areas of criminal defense, immigration, and family law. Olga is an avid seeker of all things bordering on justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity, women's empowerment, racial equity and justice, and criminal justice reform. Olga seeks to leverage these social issues to proffer solutions to better the lots of the marginalized among us. Olga sits on the board of multiple nonprofit organizations in the New England area and is the current chairperson of the Essex County Commission on the Status of Women. I just want to say a quick thank you to our partners, the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women and the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition. We'll be dropping their links in our chat as well. Feel free to check those out. And then as usual, stay tuned for upcoming roundtable series conversations. You can always find more information on the series by emailing us or again, visiting that equalpayandmade.com website. And please, 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 please remember to take that exit poll, or excuse me, that exit survey that will pop up if you're using the Zoom app. If you're watching from Facebook, we will drop it in the comments, but that allows us to get some feedback on future sessions and how the series has been going for most folks. So thank you for taking that in advance. And without further ado, I'm gonna hand the conversation over to our moderator, Commissioner Okoye.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sproul. Thank you, ladies. The Takeout, Women, Equal Pay, and the Restaurant Industry. I am excited to jump into this very vital topic with the ladies. And I'm gonna kick off this conversation with Kayana. Kayana, where are you? I see you. Hello, hello, Kayana.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. How is it going?
I'm doing well, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. You are in this space, Kayana. Tell me from your personal experience, how you have seen the COVID-19 pandemic impact, women. We know this already. We know it's disproportionate impact on women. How have you seen from your personal experience, from what you've heard, from what you've seen? Can you share one with us this morning, please?
Sure. All right. So I want to specifically touch on two things. When you look at the restaurant industry specifically, who do you see, right? Women play a pivotal role in the industry. For example, you go to a restaurant, you get all dressed up, I'm ready for my steak. You sit down, wait at the table, and by the time you look up, you see someone approaching you with a glass of water and a menu. Usually it's a woman. 7 out of 10 times it's a woman. 71% of women nationwide are waitresses. Make up the waitresses at 100%. So that's who you're seeing. So when COVID hit, excuse me, when COVID hit, restaurants shut down, we were under a state of emergency. There were so many rules and restrictions that we had to abide by. And in my opinion, the two areas that suffer the most, other than healthcare, of course, were the service industry and daycare and schools. So when everything shut down, a lot of these women lost their jobs, and then they had to take on another role as, the teacher or the stay-at-home mom. Nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom or a teacher, of course, but these individuals who are used to being waitresses, they had to play a different role, right? And they're women, so society deems them as the caregiver or the default person to take care of. So they had to stay home. And across the nation, that took a toll on women, of course. By the time things opened up, I feel like restaurants were scrambling. They lost their waitresses. And you're wondering why, but jobs weren't paying you guys for medical coverage. If you caught COVID, no one was paying you for those 2 weeks. No one could stay with your children when you needed childcare. There was not enough safety protocols placed at work. And waitress, you don't want to come home and give your child or your family COVID. And again, jobs were not providing flexibility for women. If they say 3 p.m., you're not supposed to come in, my child's school closed at 3:45, then what? Am I going to get fired? What are we going to do? And honestly, with all of that being said, it brings on this domino effect. You know, if I have 4 out of 6 of my workers, and they're waitresses, 4 of them, and they all can't show up to work, right? I only have 2 servers left. Now, running a restaurant, that's going to take a toll on us because now service is slow. Now customers are upset. Now I might lose money because the customers don't want to come back because of the service. So it's this circle that just goes around. And it started with the pandemic, really, the lack of control, the lack of safety, and the lack of protocols. Yes, but on the bright side, I can say this pandemic allowed many women to venture off into a different role. For me, cafe, actually, we opened in the pandemic. You know, my mom couldn't work, so she had no choice but to jump and open her business. So although it did take a toll on many women, I believe that it did push a lot of women into purpose.
That's a great answer. Pushing one into their purpose. Rebecca, hello. Same question, Rebecca.
Good morning.
From your personal experience, how do you think the COVID pandemic disproportionately impacted women in your industry?
So, of course, very similar sentiment. I think that what happened was that it impacted families holistically. It was whether it was a single parent family, a 2-parent family, whatever the dynamic was, the default parent, who typically is the mother in the family, had to balance everything. And that happened in my life too. I was responsible for figuring out what to do with my kids, figuring out what to do with my business. So it was extremely complex. And again, we talked about this when we were prepping for this roundtable, was that when you deal with parents who have no other opportunities and have to earn, what is the choice? And kids sometimes should be the primary choice, but if you need income in order to feed your kids, in order to provide for your education, it's extremely complex and one of these questions that you actually never want to have to manage. So during COVID, obviously everyone was really down and out as a result, and with the restaurant environment, we struggled to understand how to manage it appropriately. And so what we did is we were extremely flexible with our employees. I employed over 200 people prior to COVID. Now we're back to around 150. Our organization did pay through the PFMLA for people who did have to get testing or were out for 10 days. Everyone was covered through insurance. We provided that, but absolutely, I think that we were not part of the norm, but it absolutely should be the norm that when you do have healthcare, when you do have daycare, when you do have issues like that, businesses should be able to support families in that way. And the state needs to support the businesses that are small, that may not be able to afford that otherwise, for sick, for children, et cetera. And we've talked about this. I mean, the child care issue is an issue for mothers and fathers equally. It is very complex.
Very complex. Great answer, Rebecca. And I'm so happy that your restaurant is able to be almost back to the pre-COVID number of employees. You said you're back now 150 out of 200?
We're at 150 out of 200. One of our restaurants is actually closed permanently as a result of COVID, but it's a little bit more complex than just COVID. But yes, and those the people who were our families and parents were predominantly those that worked in our donut company, and we actually stayed open the entire time, and we were very flexible with timeframes. But I don't think that that's the norm, and we have to fight for that as a community, because once you support families, you can support commerce. It doesn't work the other way around.
Once you support families, you support commerce. I love that. Amy, hello.
Hi.
Amy, you are in this space. What have you seen in terms of policy that has worked in combating this adverse effect that Kiana and Rebecca just spoke about? What have you seen that has not worked? What are you suggesting in terms of, if the legislators were here today, what is working, what can work, what is an absolute no-no? Please.
Oh, yeah, sure. You know, I think policy is obviously the articulation of our values in our institutions. So, you know, I think most of us were in a pretty panicked and, you know, distressed emotional state. So obviously, like, policies were things that we were, you know, creating on the fly. But the first policy that I created in, you know, post shutting down my dining room and laying off my entire staff was that I wasn't going to call anybody back who didn't feel comfortable coming into the restaurant. And obviously at that moment, we didn't have PPE. We didn't know, you know, people were saying that it was on surfaces, and if you touched doorknobs and then touched your face, you were going to contract, you know, COVID-19. So, you know, not knowing what was going on really, the first thing, you know, I had employees who were caring for their elderly parents, and I certainly was not going to ask them to come into the restaurant. So I had some, you know, younger single guys who were willing to come in and work. And I think from a policy perspective, from the statewide, I think, you know, if there is another emergency like this, I think leaving the small businesses out there hanging with no real understanding of what we're dealing with, no PPE, no access to PPE, that would certainly be something would be nice for us to address in the future. But, you know, also creating a little bit more of like safety nets for the businesses and the employees. We immediately instituted hazard pay, went straight up to $15 per hour. And the third policy we implemented was to match what people would make on unemployment, which was really difficult. And we didn't know if the numbers would match, and we certainly leaned on our PPP, but I didn't want the employees to look back and be like, wow, I would have made so much more money if I had stayed home on my couch. And I think that was a really smart policy for us, because we've retained a lot of our employees. And I think there would have been a lot of resentment, and people would have been quick to jump ship to another restaurant, you know, 8 to 10, 12 months down the road if we hadn't matched that. So I think, you know, there's a lot of conversations, you know, post-COVID about equity, safety nets, you know, information, and, you know, in addition to childcare.
Amy, I love your articulation of the policy that you placed immediately post-COVID to ensure that your employees who felt comfortable, so not everyone, if you do feel comfortable, I love that a lot. And the fact that you had a slew of, did you say young men who were ready and willing to jump in? That's great. Articulation of our values in our institution. That's your definition of policy. I had to write that down, Amy, because that is such a powerful definition. I'm going to have to repeat that for emphasis. Policy, according to Amy, is the articulation of our values in our institution. And we do have to place a lot of value in our institution so that when emergencies like this happen, we don't have to now scramble like almost every business did. Michelle. Hello, Michelle. Michelle, talk to me about the policy you implemented in your business, as well as policies you could suggest in terms of meeting emergencies like this.
Sure, absolutely. We've been doing everything remotely. Fortunately, because we're a service that folks can access, we were able to pivot and let folks just access us completely virtually. We're not sure when we're going to start resuming in-person services yet. What we've been hearing from women, though, is that they're really enjoying being able to access us virtually, and there's not a huge demand for us to come back in person just yet. What we are keeping an eye on, though, is the digital divide. We want to make sure that folks can actually access us. So we have been gathering plexiglass shields. we're working to stay on top of state policies with respect to vaccines to make sure that we don't put anybody at risk as we move forward. I would love to pick up on Amy's point, though, about possible ways that we could be building resilience moving forward. I love this idea of some sort of a state fund that folks could be accessing for emergencies that are beyond their control. Something that we're working on at CWE is a portfolio of services to help businesses build that resilience within their own plans, within how they approach their P&L, building savings, making sure that folks feel really comfortable with different resources available to them. So they've got some disaster planning in place as we move forward. It's a multi-pronged solution.
I agree, Michelle. Thank you so much. Kiana, do you have any thoughts on policies that worked for you or that you might suggest for the state, for the government?
Honestly, I agree with them both. I feel like it's our responsibility to speak with the state, speak with the legislators about what's going on, because, you know, they're not on the grounds, we are, but it's not going to, it can't only come from one person, right? It takes a village. I feel like everybody has to come together and demand these things, unless it's not going to work. I just feel like that would be, as a collective body, that's the only way it's going to work. But we have to stand up for these individuals. Important.
I like it because you are the ones living in that space and navigating and facing those unique challenges. You're in a better position to advocate better in that space. I love that answer a lot. Rebecca, you have been in this space for so long. You know that the majority of the restaurant industry is female, and yet we look around at the leadership, the ownership of restaurants, managerial positions. It doesn't look like a lot of females are there, and it makes one wonder, why is that? And this must have a potentially huge effect economically on women. So my question to you is this: how do you think, or do you believe that having women in those leadership positions can positively impact this industry?
Of course. But you also look at our representation within Congress, within CEOs. Women still do not maintain the numbers that they should. It's actually sort of ridiculous if this is still part of this discussion that we're having. Why aren't women there? I still don't understand. When we're 50% of the population and of the voting demographic, how about we make some actual movement ourselves to get into that place? With regards to ownership, though, there is vast complexity within the restaurant industry that makes it complex for women and especially those with families to manage this life. It is very, very difficult. It is time consumptive. It is physically consumptive. It is mentally consumptive. But if you see the most successful restaurants out there from a P&L perspective, which was what Michelle was just managing and referencing, the women are actually doing quite well, probably better if you look at how they're managing their numbers. And if you find female ownership, generally their leadership team also is women. And that is very common within our industry. But Boston, I think, is unique and fantastic with the number of women leaders. I've never seen a city like it. I don't think that there's another city in the country that has the number of women owners, women chefs, women cooks, women dishwashers. I mean, we are everywhere, specifically in Massachusetts. I have not seen it anywhere else. I've not seen it in New York. I have not seen it in Chicago. I have not seen it in any other large city. It may be a result of the time that we have. We also have shorter hours. You know, our bars generally close at 1 a.m. here, not at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatnot. But the most competency I see is within the female demographic, because we are inherently multitaskers and understand how to manage multiple things. And the beauty of the restaurant industry for all of us is that it is the most amazing collaboration of quant and qualitative minds. So you can be unbelievably creative and unbelievably numbers focused, and you can do this within the restaurant industry. The one thing I do want to mention, though, which was brought up, is about prepping for doomsday, the restaurant industry has such small margins. I mean, wildly small margins. If you know, in a good day, maybe you'll do 6%, 8%. It's unheard of to do 10, but some people do 10, 20. The norm is probably 2%. That this prepping for doomsday is not realistic. And we also should be just focused on running good businesses, not preparing for COVID. COVID is hopefully a once in a lifetime experience, not our future. But yes, this can teach us that we have wild resiliency, and our teams are the most important thing out there. And you rely on your team and you respect your team, just what Amy did. I mean, that idea that she said, I'm going to do whatever I can. Yes. Automatically. There was no question in her mind. I'm going to do anything I can to save my team. And that is such an important aspect of this business. And that's what I think is really critical. But I have been in this business a long time. We could have never anticipated this. Hopefully we never have to manage it again, but our ability to pivot is critical. It's critical for every business to go from home to this, to managing your kids, to managing your employees, to managing your healthcare, to understanding that paying your people 100% above table is critical, because otherwise they will not get the benefit of unemployment to the fullest degree that they should. I mean, there are lots of these things that we need to talk about from a restaurant industry, but bravo to everyone who made it through.
Rebecca, that was such an eloquent analysis. Thank you so much for that. I love when you said that women are inherently multitaskers, and we do know that we are. Our ability to bounce back, our resilience, our grit, I mean, it's not even open to debate. But Amy, I have this question for you. How does female leadership lead to changes in policies that benefit women? Do you think female leadership can lead to such changes?
Sure. I think that we are more collective conscious in our approach to things. And I think that certainly saved my business. I never did anything. I never instituted a policy without talking to everybody on staff and asking people what their comfort level was. Do we need more plexiglass? You know, if we can get masks, you know, do you want 2 masks? You know, I mean, there's just so many different, there were just so many different layers to how to navigate and pivot. And I don't think there were any avenues that involved just charging forward and not, you know, doing consensus, which is what women do best. I'm actually in a conversation now about going co-op, because what I learned during this pandemic was how important the collective is. And so, you know, in my conversations with the state agencies around going co-op, they were talking about how we have this love of the solo entrepreneur who is, you know, pulled himself up by his bootstraps and, you know, this Howard Hughes image. And I think that is going to really change post-pandemic, because I think that, the people who are going to survive and thrive and show the resilience are the ones who are collective mind and about the cooperative model.
I agree with you. There's an African proverb that actually, and I might not quote it well, but the collective transcends individual success. I guess that's how I can summarize what it is. So yes, I totally agree with you that if it's a collective, the chances of getting it right or the chances of bouncing back is a lot higher. You know, I had Kayana, I know that there was a survey that was recently done by the Mass Commission on the Status of Women that specifically exposed not just the fact that the pandemic impacted women much more disproportionately than men, but especially women of color, Black women, minority women. My question to you is this: how can we ensure that women like that too are given the opportunity to access roles that are not the typical roles that, you know, dishwasher, and not to say that anything is wrong with those roles, but how we're trying to get women into leadership roles? How can we get that done?
First, I believe you have to be intentional, the employee and the employer. I feel a lot of places of business, they talk about diversity, but it's very rare that they push a woman of color, brown or Black, into these positions. You have to be intentional. Even as the employee, the person who wants to go, I feel like they also have a responsibility of taking that leap of faith and making their intentions known. But as a business, as a boss, I would say you have to just be intentional.
I love that intentionality on both sides, both the employer and the employee. Thank you so much, Kiana, for that answer. Michelle, I am a mom, like maybe some of us here. I have 5 children. I juggle. Every day of my life is a juggle in something. In fact, my brain has so many compartments. I don't even know which compartment I'm tapping into at every given point in time. So my question to you is this: we juggle so many roles, Michelle, and I'm thinking in the wake of the pandemic, what accommodations or did you make? I mean, what accommodations did you provide specifically for the female workers in your organization?
Yeah, the first thing that we did was building out remote work options for folks, and we expressed the ability to be flexible with respect to schedules. We wanted to hear our folks. We knew that our team was not only dealing with unprecedented challenges in their own personal and professional lives, but that all of the entrepreneurs that we support are also dealing with unprecedented challenges. We can't pretend to have a perfect solution to that for anybody, as much as we would love to, but what we can do is, to pick up on Kayana's point, we can be intentional, we can listen, we can build communities, we can build networks, and we can stretch ourselves to do everything that we can to accommodate folks and meet them where they are. So what that looked like for a lot of our employees was not only remote work, but as I mentioned, flexible hours, having folks share their calendars and block off when they're not around, encouraging folks, giving comp time to just breathe.
Yes.
And when it came to our client service, we wanted to make sure that we were able to meet entrepreneurs where they are as well. We learned a lot about shifting away from live in-person trainings and having trainings that are on demand, that folks can access when they want. And if they need to pause it every 5 minutes because they have a kiddo who is doing remote learning and they need to come back, great, we will do that. We will make ourselves available at any time of the day that folks need to be there. If you want to have your kiddo on the call with you, fine.
That is awesome, Michelle. That is awesome. And Rebecca, what accommodations did you make? Or, I mean, I know some larger corporations with the unemployment insurance and the relief checks, I mean, it helped from the government, but I was wondering for smaller businesses like yours, well, your business is not really small, but did you make any accommodations for your employees?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the beginning, it was making adjustments to schedules. That was very important. The one thing that we did towards the end was the vaccine access. I just want to, I got on that like the second we were able to. I was having actually some pretty significant arguments with the Baker administration. I don't know if he particularly loves me at this point. About the fact that by vaccinating people within the restaurant industry, it has such an unbelievable impact on, as we were saying, families, kids, etc., that if a mother can get it, a father can get it, someone who lives in co-housing situations, it was very important. So we signed up everyone who needed a vaccine. We got them in line. We actually were able to get a physician in East Boston to provide a direct access to all of our employees. So we have everyone vaccinated at this point, and we made it a mandatory requirement in our company.
Wow.
To keep everyone safe with the reasonable accommodations, obviously for medical or religious reasons. But we did this to keep our collective safe. And we did that. It was super important to me because we actually had an employee die of COVID in the beginning, in May of last year, someone who worked for me for many years, and it was heartbreaking to all of us. but we wanted to make sure that everyone maintained their safety. We did not open up indoor dining until our employees were safe and vaccinated and had enough time. It was, all of these things were very critical to us. The flexibility with sick time, because we are a company that provides sick time. We're also large enough that we provide healthcare. That was very important, lots of flexibility with that. There was lots of mental health days that were provided to staff, because I mean, this was the most, I can't actually think back on it, because we're all going to have PTSD based on what's happened in the past 18 months. I think if we look back, we will be it will be hindered in our ability to move forward. But those were critical things. If someone needed front pay and I could do it, we would do that way. Anything to support the team. And there were moments when, of course, we would fail at it too. I mean, there was no way to be able to manage this all at the exact same time, but we made every effort to make this workable with our employees and to be aware of everything else that was going on at the same time. It wasn't just COVID. We were having just a social and cultural awareness and awakening that was critical to the success of our country. And the change, thank God, in administration during this whole time. Thank God for the change in administration, that now we can have faith in our CDC. We can have faith that our government is actually watching out for us and not for them, themselves. So
that is true. That is true, Rebecca. That is true. Thank you for raising all of the issues in addition to the COVID that we've faced in the last 18 months. And can I just say something? We need to be proud of ourselves. The fact that we're all here today is a testament to our resilience and our grit, honestly. Kiana, I know that a lot of women in the restaurant industry are still, unemployed. Some people lost their job and they're unable to get back to work. And how the barriers, how do you think that these barriers related to their goal, how can the government help? Or they are not yet employed, what do you suggest that the government can do at this point to help them get back to work, if at all?
I honestly don't know how the government really can help other than provide businesses. They have like those small businesses loan. I feel like they should actually accept those people who are applying for those loans and give them more money so the businesses can actually hire people. In terms of the government helping employees, I don't really see how they would help so much.
The barriers still exist for those women who probably still want to go back to work. And I know that there are barriers like Rebecca and I touched that a little bit, the fact that women who live in the Commonwealth or people who live in the Commonwealth who are undocumented, can still not drive. And Rebecca alluded to the fact that most of the people who work with her in the restaurant industry, Rebecca, can you speak a little bit about that today? Because this is your chance to actually talk about that very important and vital issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that immigration is a huge issue. The fact that we need, I think that Massachusetts has actually been very positive when it comes to dealing with immigration. We have a federal issue on immigration. Within our organization, within my company at least, our employees are all documented, but I think that is not necessarily the norm. And the majority of the restaurant industry is made up of at least some proportion of people who are undocumented. And they are reluctant to apply for support, whether it's unemployment, even though they may be paying taxes into the system. They're nervous to get the COVID vaccine because they're afraid that it's going to track them. There are many reasons for the immigrant population to be skeptical. We've had 4 years of some pretty anti-immigration policies. No wonder people are nervous. There were fears of ICE raids and things like that. And thankfully, Massachusetts has been very supportive of the industry, but we need to figure out a way of knowing who people are, pathways to legal status, getting DACA kids on board, with their final immigration papers. I mean, all of these things are critical, but the immigration, I mean, you and I have talked about this, we could talk about it for years, is a critical part, and it's part of our healthcare as well. Healthcare is critical to this. If you have employees who are nervous to go to hospitals, how can you have a supported environment? If you have employees that are worried about their kids going to schools, how can you have a supported workforce? So these work together.
Thank you, Rebecca, so much. And for our listeners who don't know, there's a bill currently sitting at the State House. It's called the Act Relative to Work and Family Mobility. And it's S2289. And this bill essentially ensures that people in the Commonwealth who are undocumented at this time can actually have a basic driver's license. The reality being that, you know, everyone drives. So we want to make sure that people who are actually driving are licensed and have the ability, and that a mom would not, because they're afraid they're going to be arrested, not be able to take the child to the hospital or get themselves to work, knowing the critical role that moms play in families as essentially the people who support the economic foundation or backbone of every family. So it's S2289, but it's called the Work and Family Mobility Act. Rebecca and I spoke about it before. Ladies, as we close, you guys are the experts in this field. And I'm going to start with you, Amy. What are you going to advise a woman who is watching us right now when thinking, I'm looking to join the restaurant industry? How do I even go about that? How do I establish my own business? How do I, you know, what are the tips you can give to someone like that, Amy?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually mentoring a Greenfield Community College business student who's looking to start her first food service business. And my advice to her was really to focus on the quality of food and be more nimble. I mean, when I got into the business 18, 19 years ago, everything was about brick and mortar. Now, obviously, there's been a shift to ghost kitchens. Boston now has a law that you can prepare foods in your home, which is an incredible removal of a barrier for a lot of people of color. You know, we like to bring, you know, my mother's culture, you know, people are just cooking on the streets and serving out of, you know, their kitchens. And obviously, you know, in America, that's never going to happen. But, you know, they say it takes about $150,000, $200,000 to get into your first brick and mortar. That's a huge impediment. So I love that the millennials are seeing ways to, you know, create food trucks, and they're popping up. And like, I'm closed on Sundays. So I was like, pop up on Sundays. And with the new, you know, Instagram and Facebook and DoorDash, there's so many ways to market now and be more of like a guerrilla kind of ninja food operation.
I love it. I love ninja. I mean, that was funny. I love it. Thank you so much. Michelle, I am trying to get into the restaurant industry. I want to set up my own shop or work with, how do I even start?
Both and underline what Amy said. What I think is brilliant is to chat with folks who have been there, done that, learn from their experience. And if you're fortunate enough to find someone to be a mentor to you, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Other things that I would recommend, things that I wish I knew, as I mentioned at the introduction, I had a coffee shop for a lot of years before I started working at CWE. If I had to do it all again, I would have made sure that I knew what free resources were out there to help me with the mechanics of running a business. So those are things like the SBA family provides. CWE is a partner to the SBA, so SCORE, the Small Business Development Centers. So I would really encourage folks, in addition to reaching out to folks who are already in the industry to get their insight, take advantage of the free resources that are out there to help you plan it, assess its viability.
I love it. I love it, Michelle. Thank you so much. Rebecca, help me. I'm trying to get into that industry and get some of the goodies you guys are getting out of it. How do I go about it?
You know, I might tell you to wait a little bit. I just, we're in a moment right now where I would not recommend a lot of people get into a full service restaurant situation with staffing shortages, which has nothing to do with unemployment. There's this trope out there that people say that the reason why we're having a difficult time hiring is because there are so many people on unemployment. We were having a difficult time hiring prior to COVID, and this is a housing and transportation issue. It is not that people are sitting home on their butts. Absolutely not the case. Maybe that's like a handful, but that is not the case. I think that hiring right now is so wildly complex in Massachusetts that I would probably tell you to stay in your current job, send me your business plan. I'm happy to read it for you, and then we can move forward. But I would sort of sit tight for a little bit and do some research, and we will have a conversation. But I do not think that this is the moment to start a food business. I mean, a full service restaurant. I think it is the time to learn to go and work in a restaurant. I think that that's actually the most critical thing. I'm going to take that back. The first thing you should do is work in a restaurant. Work front of the house, work back of the house, understand what it takes, specifically back of the house, become a dishwasher, understand how it is to prep, understand all of those things, and then let's have a discussion afterward. But that's really what I would tell you, is sort of pump the brakes, experience it, and then let's talk.
Okay, I hear you.
Email me. Anyone can email me. I'm more than happy.
I hear you, Michelle. Kayana, wrap it up for us. What are your tips that you're going to let our listeners take home as we wrap up?
I have a few things. One, I would say be flexible and adaptable to every situation. I would say I'm the opposite of Rebecca. I would say go for it. If you think you have like those customer base, I would say go for it. And you might fail, but if you fail, get back up again. And another thing is do everything from your heart, because if you do, like, you'll be successful no matter what.
I love it. Kiana, thank you so much, ladies. Amy, Michelle, Rebecca, Kiana, thank you so much. So much nuggets that we're going to have to chew on. And I'm going to kick it back to Commissioner Spruill. Shaitia.
Hi, thank you so much. You guys were fantastic. We have some activity in the chat. I know a lot of us are excited to learn more from you each individually. I see somebody said I sent LinkedIn messages to all of you and invited you to an event next week on the North Shore. So I'm really excited to see the connections already happening. We had a couple of questions that are really general to the group, so feel free to answer as you hear it. There was a question regarding the spike in usage of delivery services and how, if you have used them, and has it been impactful? Has it been more challenging? What are your thoughts on partnering with Uber Eats or other companies versus, you know, having a delivery driver on your own?
I have many comments. It's a racket. Just to be honest, I think that it is, we have gotten the charges that we get, which now are, I believe, went away. The restrictions went away today. Is today the 15th or the 16th? Oh, the Emergency Act, I think, ended yesterday. So these delivery fees can be up to 30% of your bill is charged back to the restaurant. So delivery fees are outrageous. But there's no option. If you want to get your food out, if you're a takeout business, or if you're a brick and mortar that has now, or at least a year ago, had no indoor seating, you had to use them. And thankfully our representatives were able to put the limit on it, but the fees are outrageous, just truly outrageous. Credit card fees also, I think that all of the people on the panel and whatnot should understand that we are getting charged so much higher rates because we're doing these card not present rates. I can talk about this also for hours. You are being charged like 50 basis points higher for any delivery, anything that's done online if you are not using a credit card. So we are being charged so much more as a result internally of doing delivery and takeout.
I'm gonna ask Kiana or Amy, did you guys use any delivery services through the pandemic, and what that experience has been like for you guys?
So at the at Unique Cafe, we're actually looking into delivery right now. And thank you, Rebecca, for pointing all of that out. I see your face. Because you know, a lot of people call and ask, like, do we have delivery? But the fees are outrageous. I don't know whether it's better to hire someone to actually do delivery for the shop or DoorDash or Grubhub. They're just outrageous.
I have mixed feelings about, we use DoorDash. My feelings are mixed because it really did allow us to have delivery immediately. But obviously the fees were outrageous, but the legislature did move to the 15% cap, which was nice. And I would say that it's a good way to scaffold your program because you can immediately be on DoorDash. And my sister loves DoorDash. So she was like, you're never going to compete with that online experience, because not only is DoorDash providing delivery, it's also creating an app and, the phone experience that a lot of consumers are moving to. So I think every owner operator should be thinking, well, how can I create this experience for my customers and also retain more? But in the meantime, I do think it's a good, introductory step that's pretty immediate into that part of the segment of the market. But I think we should all have an exit plan. It may be a gateway drug. I'm not sure.
Thank you. One other question, which I know we kind of touched on it with Olga's last question, but I'm curious to know, what is one thing that you wish you knew before entering your businesses? And for Michelle, what is one thing that you would share with prospective entrepreneurs who are looking to enter this industry with a small business, in whatever order?
I can go first. I'm new to the restaurant industry. We just started in February, actually. And oh my gosh, my hats is everyone, right? Because it's hard work. Every day it's hard work. Every day you don't know what's coming. Different customers, different food. It's just hard work. So kudos to everyone who is doing it. I would say customer service is really big. Even if you're having that bad day, you just stub your toe, it doesn't matter. Put on a smile and serve the customer how you would want to be served. I think that's the most important, customer service.
Thank you. Michelle?
I would add to do your homework on some of that. I think these ladies have brought up some really great points this afternoon with what it really is, all of the dimensions of being a restaurant owner. I really appreciated Rebecca's point earlier about how razor thin the margins typically are, and that can make it really tough. It's an incredibly rewarding, wonderful experience, to be clear, to be a restaurant owner. It is amazing. It's not right for everybody, and what you want to do is do your homework and make sure it's the right fit for you and see if this is the right time. Again, to borrow on Rebecca's point, do your homework, see what's there.
Thank you. One other question, I think this might take us to the end, but how can those of us outside the sector, we foodies who love having a vibrant woman-led restaurant sector, support you guys? I mean, other than eating out as much as possible, what specific asks do you have for us as takeaways from this great conversation?
I have one thought on this. I think that working in the service industry should be a requirement in high school. I know that this is sort of a random thought, but once you have worked in a restaurant, you understand humility and people in a different way than you will never understand it otherwise. You meet and you experience different types of people, different types of background, but you all are working towards the same goal. Oh, someone just said I got fired from every waitressing job I ever had. I probably would have been too. But that's one of those things that I think that we should encourage, because there will be much more humanity in the experience between customers and staff, which is I think where a lot of things go wrong. This idea that customers are always right is not the paradigm, nor should it ever be. It should be that we treat people respectfully together. That is the most important thing. And I'm more than happy to talk to Kiana about that too, because that's one of the things that you learn very quickly in this industry, is that you have to be confident and also humble and have some humility. I do not always have that, but it's part of this. But to support the restaurant industry is to continue going out, to tip nicely, to tip as much as you possibly can, and also to tip your delivery drivers too. I know that I was just saying against DoorDash, but that's the organization, not the employees, because the employees are not getting a lot of money. But just to continue going out and to be kind when you're at restaurants and understand.
Thank you.
And I would say, I think consumers, everything's changing so much right now, but I think consumers really should influence one another to be a little more educated in their criticism. I get really frustrated if, there's sort of this Kardashian, like, I'm going to go online and trash that restaurant. And I think that might feel sort of empowering in the moment, and maybe people do have a bad experience, but you can also email the restaurant and create a relationship and say, hey, I really didn't enjoy my experience. I would love to get a refund and, or a gift certificate and try something else. Can you make a recommendation? Because I do think, sometimes I'll see somebody give us a bad review and then somebody else will jump on that. And so then there becomes this sort of like echo chamber effect, and almost like there's a little blutter, and like, maybe we can take this restaurant down as concerns. And I don't know what the end goal is there. So I would say, less time online trying to be like a restaurant critic, and more, how can I support this restaurant and actually give them, sometimes my customers, will send me an email and I'll go back to the kitchen and say, hey, people are saying that there's too much rice in the burritos. And so that really helps us, and we really appreciate it. And I'm happy to refund money and give people a gift certificate. But, this kind of like surface Instagram, Facebook review thing that's going on is not, I don't think it's great for us. So if you have friends who do it, tell them to knock it off.
Amy, so many thumbs up on that. I'm sorry, I just jumped in. So many thumbs up on it. We all have the same objective. We're trying to provide a lovely experience for our guests. And if it does not work, let us know. We're going to fix it. We have this, Amy, thumbs up on all of this. Thank you very much.
I just want to highlight, Michelle, just before you said that, Amy, Michelle had dropped in the chat to that social media engagement is huge as well. Like, share, and leave positive reviews generously. And I just have to say that I think that it is always, especially now in this time of digital, like everything, I think like even being able to leave a positive review on your favorite restaurant, your favorite catering service can do a huge amount of good for that business. So I definitely echo that. And we do know how like dangerous a negative comment can go and then spiral out of control. So like Amy said, knock off the bad reviews and just engage in conversation. But that brings us to 11:59 on the dot. We are about to close. Thank you all so much for this great conversation. As a reminder, folks who've registered, you will receive a follow-up email with the direct link to our recording, as well as some of the links that we discussed today, as well as links to all of our business owners and CWE. Please stay tuned for our next conversation that will be posted very soon. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, the Office of Economic Empowerment. And please, I encourage you to follow the Mass Commission on the Status of Women, the Mass Women of Color Coalition, CWE, and our Unique Cafe, Mesa Verde, and the Gallows Group. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.